Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for jumping on the call today. It's an absolute honor to chat to you all, so I appreciate you taking the time. I'm conscious we've only got half an hour, and I know Ross just gave a little bit of context, but maybe to give a bit of background on Earned itself and how the business started would be a nice way to kick off. So we started Earned as a business. I had a friend who got into a really poor financial situation from using a payday loan. I'm not sure if any of you know the provider of Nimble or Cash Converters. There's a range of them out there. Anyway, he's a very intelligent young man and incidentally did the fairly unintelligent thing of needing to buy a fridge and not having the bank of mummy and daddy to fall back on, so he took out a loan. And it wasn't the single loan that got him into trouble, Levi. It was he took out two loans on top of that additional loan just to cover the initial loan. And when you think about the situation that puts someone in, someone who needed access to income, right, at a certain point in time, or needed access to cash for an unexpected expense, was forced into predatory credit. And when you look into the numbers in Australia, there's about 780,000 payday loans taken out annually. More than that, 3.64 is the average number of loans a household will take out. So people don't find themselves in these situations where you take out one loan and then that's it. Because of the predatory rates and what you're forced to pay going on and on and on, you actually find yourself in this ongoing debt spiral. And 35.6% of these loans are taken out for one-off household expenses. So we thought there was an absolutely incredible opportunity to better support someone with what is essentially an employer-sponsored safety net, right, of their own income. So the core of our product is to provide people with the flexibility to access their earned income as and when they've earned it. I'll jump into the product a bit more, but what I wanted to quickly do beforehand is just run you through the research that we did, my co-founder and I did before jumping into this. Some pretty, I don't know what the right word to say would be, but pretty horrific statistics when you look at it. So there's, in Australia, right, there's 1 in 2 Aussies live paycheck to paycheck. So literally every second person sitting in your office statistically, or every second person that you walk by to get to work in the morning is living to paycheck. So it finds themselves in these situations where if they need access to money, it's very difficult for them to find. They don't have savings. Beyond that, 1 in 3 Aussies actually can't access $500 in an emergency. And that's a pretty horrific thing. So if you have your daughter's birthday party, or in the case of a root canal the other day, if you have an unexpected expense pop up, a lot of the times you're forced into credit because you don't have your own safety net. And unfortunately in Australia, the options that we have as individuals from a credit perspective are either opaque, hard to understand, or at absolute worst predatory and get you into a worse financial situation. One of the reasons why we're chatting to, I guess, you guys today and why we really started this business is because it's not a concern that stays with an employee and doesn't follow them into the workplace. It's actually the exact opposite of that. So an employee's number one concern in the workplace is financial stress. From report after report that's coming out, financial pressure ranks as the number one thing. And if any of you have ever been in the really unfortunate situation of having to fire someone or being made redundant yourself, you know that a lot of the time the first thing going through either of your minds is, excuse my language, but crap, where am I going to get my next paycheck from? So we walk into a number of organizations doing some pretty incredible things around employee well-being. And one of the conversations we're trying to have, because a lot of these organizations are doing things like yoga days and mindfulness days and novated car leasing and all these tools which are helpful to an individual, right? But it doesn't solve the thing that keeps an individual awake at night. So financial pressure, to use that example again, if you have an unexpected expense, your daughter's birthday on Monday, and your rent is due on Wednesday and you only get paid on Friday, that is a stress that can put an individual in a situation where it impacts them at work. And we think that there's an important conversation to be had that if you're providing people with flexibility in all other areas in the workplace. So there's a lot of flexibility programs to support diversity and inclusion. So if you are a father and you need to drop your son at football practice or ballet practice at 4 p.m., it's most likely that today, a single father, for example, today your workplace will support that and say, no problem, you can go do that and work from home for the rest of the day. And just like we're putting in place flexible practices to support that type of diversity, we think there's an important conversation to be had around supporting financial diversity as well. And I think one of the key reasons why we're not having this conversation is because it's taboo. So if you look at this statistic, right, 8 out of 10 people in financial stress are ashamed about being in financial stress. And more than that, 3 out of 10 of those people aren't comfortable sharing that situation with their partner. And if they're not comfortable sharing it with their partner, it's very, very, very unlikely that they're comfortable sharing it with their employer. So again, we walk into places where people say, we just don't hear about this. And one of the key reasons you don't hear about this is because people aren't comfortable coming to you. And we think that as an employer, if you think that 1 in 2 people are living paycheck to paycheck, you are the center of that individual's life. It's unlikely they have investment properties or a share portfolio or anything else that can really support them. It's their paycheck. And the financial stress that an individual is under actually brings itself pretty intensely into the workplace. So if an individual is under financial stress, and this was a study recently done by EY, if an individual is under financial stress and they started with the IQ of an average person prior to that financial stress, once under that financial stress, they now become borderline deficient. So in a large majority of organizations, people are either customer facing or service orientated or strategically focused, right? In any of those roles, if an individual, actually in any role, full stop, if an individual's IQ falls from average to borderline deficient, so does the output of the organization. And that's caused by financial stress. And if you take this across Australia, it's not an insignificant amount that our nation is losing to financial stress. So the EQ piece is the IQ piece is a bit more intangible and fluffier. But AMP recently did a study and brought to light some pretty shocking figures in terms of what we're losing. So 46 hours per employee per year, and that equates to $31 billion, right? Caused by, or a loss of $31 billion due to financial stress. So that's Estonia's GDP gone, which is pretty crazy. So if we recognize that financial stress is prevalent, we recognize employees face financial stress, that they bring it into the workplace and that it's costing employers, right? The question is, what do we do? So when we first looked at it, there's an interesting old saying that if you need a new idea, you should go read an old book. So my team and I went and read the oldest book that we could possibly find, and you'll see this quote here. It's from Deuteronomy 24:15. Pay them their wages each day before sunset, because they need the money and depend on it. Otherwise, they may cry to the Lord against you, and you'll be guilty of sin. So we're not saying we're doing God's work at all. In fact, at one stage, we were considering putting this on the front page of our website, but thought better of it. But the concept that an individual should be paid fairly for the work they've done as and when they've done it is not a new concept. And that's what we started with in our business, right? So we started by providing an individual with flexible access to the income they've earned as they've earned it. So in this example here, you can see this individual's earned $620 or accrued that amount. We cap it at 50%, and this individual's already withdrawn $180, so there's $130 available. The ability for someone to access fair and transparent credit that is their money and just hasn't been paid to them is incredibly, incredibly powerful. So if you think about those 1 in 2 people who live paycheck to paycheck in Australia, if one of those unexpected expenses come up, this gives them a tool to support themselves without having to go and lean on anyone else for it, right? It's supporting yourself with yourself. The research, so we didn't start this business to build flexible pay. We started this business to support an employee's financial well-being, or financial well-being more generally. And if you look into the research about what defines financial well-being, there's 4 key things, and the definition varies, but it's broadly across the same line as this. So an individual needs to feel in control, right? They need to have the capacity to absorb a financial shock. They need to be on track to meet their goals, and they need to have the flexibility to make choices. When you go one step deeper on this, the key defining element to all 4 of these people, or these quadrants, is savings. So if an individual has savings, they're in control. If an individual has savings, they've got the capacity to absorb a shock. If they've got savings, they're on track to meet their goals. And if they've got savings, they have the flexibility to make choices. The very difficult thing about getting an individual to build up a savings nest egg is that it's difficult from a behavioral psychology perspective. So a lot of research has been done into how do we get people to do things that might benefit themselves in the future and not in the immediate time frame that we're in. So to put that in a more tangible example, one of my colleagues has been asking me to go to gym with him for the whole week, literally every morning. And I would love to, but I'm inherently lazy. It's unfortunate to say. But it's human nature that I know going to gym is good for me and eating Mars bars is not good for me, but I still don't go to gym and eat Mars bars. And that's because human nature is that we do things that feel good for us in the moment rather than in the long term. And what Eamd does or the flexible pay aspect of this does, is it recognizes that a lot of people either can't or aren't in a position to have their own savings nest egg. So if we can support them with an employer-sponsored safety net of their earned income, then we're doing an incredible thing. But when you look on these 4 quadrants here, the access feature of the platform hits control, hits capacity to absorb a shock exceptionally, and hits flexibility to make choices exceptionally. The one area where it may fall down is on track to meet goals. And the reason it falls down there is because if an individual takes out any form of credit, right, a loan, a credit card, an overdraft fee, they're taking out money that needs to be repaid at a later stage. In Earn's example, it's the best possible thing because it's employer supported from a cost perspective. But it doesn't, Earn the access part doesn't solve the underlying challenge of why that person needed the money in the first place. So as a second step now, we're rolling out savings. So creating a frictionless way for an individual to visualize a savings goal and then set a time frame they want to achieve that in. And because we've got granularity into their pay when we're consented to do so, we can help say to them, hey, it looks like you need to go and set aside 12% of your monthly, fortnightly, or weekly earnings, and you'll achieve this in the 6 months that you want to. By doing that, and we automate that through the payroll platform, and by doing that, we remove the friction. So in that gym example, it's like my colleague came to my house, got me dressed, and I hope he didn't do that, but came to my house, got me out of bed and got me dressed, took me to gym and started lifting my arms to do the weights for me. So it provides a frictionless platform for someone to be able to achieve their longer term goals. And then as a third step, we're also rolling out a feature called Learn. So partnering with ASIC's Money Smart platform, so their content, financial wellbeing content aggregation platform, and creating bite-sized, timely, third-party and unbiased content for an individual to consume. So one of the challenges we heard time and time again in the organizations we went to was that, yeah, we're doing a lot around financial wellbeing, but we're getting AMP in, or we're getting Sun Super or one of the super or banks to come in and run seminars. And when you go one step deeper, a lot of the time they're giving super consolidation advice to people who are 25. That's the one issue. So it's not personalized. And the other issue is it's not anonymized. And what I mean by that is, because we know financial stress is taboo, if you put on a budgeting or savings seminar, less people will turn up to that than the amount that actually needed, because of the keeping up with the Joneses fear that happens with financial well-being. So the platform now, right, is access, save, and learn. So if we think about access, access gives a safety net. We give you the ability, right, to have a cushion when you need it. Save gives us the ability to support you in never needing it again. And learn teaches you what to do when you're in that situation, that financial freedom. So We support you when you need it most. We make sure that you never need it again. And then we educate you on how to be financially well with that. And that's the Earned platform at the moment. I know we have a lot of payroll professionals on today, so I did want to put in the brackets up there that this has very, very little impact on payroll, and that's what we'll jump into now. Just before we do that, I wanted to show, I mean, we have some, like when you put this product in someone's hands, from a well-being and a retention perspective, it's absolutely phenomenal. So I'll jump into this slide in a minute, but I think the reason why we get such incredible feedback from this is if you think about how you access absolutely anything else in your life these days, whether that's food, whether that's transport, entertainment, education, right? All these platforms that we use, whether it's Uber, Netflix, Udemy for learning, right, Deliveroo for food, all these things are shifting to become on demand and to fit our lifestyle in a more customized way. And when you put pay into that same bucket, it just makes sense to people. You remove that archaic sort of weekly, fortnightly, or monthly pay period, and it makes sense. Well, it's probably not archaic, as we saw from the Bible quote, but in the last, it actually came about 200 years ago when the Industrial Revolution came and large amounts of employees started to work for a single employer, and the admin burden of payroll started to get a bit more difficult. So jumping into this slide quickly, there's a couple of key ways we can really support an employer. So if you think about, and this is from a payroll and HR perspective, so a lot of the time payroll it's a hygiene factor. So it's we need to pay the right amount at the right time. But we think there's a really important conversation to be had within the payroll community about what more can we do for our businesses to be seen as a value add rather than a hygiene aspect of the business. So in most businesses, or nearly every business we go into, exceptional customer service is key, right? And that means if you've got someone providing exceptional customer service, retention is going to be important for you. Most businesses we go into are busy, right? Which means productivity is key. And lastly, in a waged or a casual environment, a lot of the organizations that we work with run on lean stuff because wages at the end of the day are one of your largest expenses. So if we can provide a solution which is a differentiating benefit that keeps people happy in their roles for longer, we have a really tangible impact on retention. If we can provide them with a safety net and help them build up their own safety net, we can reduce financial stress and therefore increase productivity at work. And if we can put a direct link between work and reward, it makes shifts much more enticing and easier to fill. So a couple of the organizations that we work with, like Glue or Adina or JD today, in the wage environment have said a really interesting thing, which we didn't expect coming into this business, but that they used to struggle to get an individual to come to work on the day to fill a last minute shift. But if a manager can now call up an employee or a casual worker and say, hey, can you come into work today? And don't forget, you can access your pay as soon as you walk out of the shop or the hotel, whatever it might be, that has a really incredible impact on getting them to come in. So one of the things we wanted to bring to light is that outside of us being extremely confident that this is the right thing to do for an individual, we also are conscious that we need to help an organization and payroll and HR professionals make a business case about why it makes sense from a return on investment perspective. So Walmart has rolled out a flexible pay or on-demand access to earned income solution in the US across 1.4 million employees. So they're the world's largest private employer. And Harvard studied the impact of flexible pay on the US employers. And you can see here some pretty incredible quotes. So implementing companies would likely become employers of choice, and the inchoate harms caused by financial stress on employees would be reduced. And then next to that, our research shows that these employer-sponsored fintech-based benefits show tantalizing potential for significantly reducing employee turnover and saving millions of expense dollars annually at large employers. Which is pretty incredibly powerful. So the number that they picked out, you'll see up here, is a 19% reduction in attrition for users of a flexible pay platform. So if you have 1,000 people in your organization and the average salary is 65K and your turnover is 20%, if we can help you reduce attrition by that amount, that's a $750,000 saving, which is no joke. So when we walk into an organization, this is part of the business case we try help payroll and HR professionals and CFOs make is that, yes, it's the right thing to do to support employees' well-being, but it's also going to provide a return on investment for our organization. So we're extremely, extremely proud. A relatively young business, but have had a huge amount of early success. So we're seriously appreciative of all the partners who have jumped on board. And the feedback, as I mentioned before, has been absolutely incredible. So from helping people out of domestic violence situations to getting to work with gas, and even buying puppies because the litter came early and they didn't have the money. There's been some absolutely incredible use cases. This is probably the question that most people on here are actually keen to understand now. So how does this actually work? There's two phases that we support you with and try to do the heavy lifting for you. And that's getting you set up. So the integration piece and then the rollout piece. The majority of this will be on the integration piece, and I'll quickly touch on the rollout. So to give you an understanding of how the app actually works and plugs into payroll and TNA providers, and in Australia, we work with a very wide range of them. So at first, you'll see up in the top here at 12 o'clock, payroll or TNA lets us know how much income an individual has accrued this pay period, and that's through a flat file, scheduled flat file, or an API. We then show you what's available. I'll show the employee what's available to withdraw. And it's 50% of their net accrued pay. The employee withdraws on demand and receives the money within minutes, literally. And then at the end of the payroll period, payroll deducts your withdrawal amount from your net after tax salary. So to put this in a really tangible example, if an individual, let's call it a salaried individual, is earning $4,000 net each pay period, right, each month, and we assume that that's going to stay the same. If you're salaried, each week that's $1,000 net. That means that each day it's $200. So 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000. So earned, because we provide you 50% of your net accrued pay, each day you will have access to $100 through the Eamd app. Cumulatively until the end of the month, you've got access to 2,000, which is 50% of your $4,000 net. If after the first week you take out $200, Earned will pay that money to you instantly, so there's no change on the employer's cash flow or working capital. And then at the end of the payroll period, we'll send a deduction line item back into the payroll system, either through an API or bulk file import, which says deduct off this employee $200. So at the end of the payroll period, the employee will get $3,800, Earned will get $200. So net throughout that period, the employee still received the $4,000, $200 here and $3,800 here. It's just the timing of when they've done it has now hopefully better shifted to suit their financial life. On this point about you withdraw on demand and receive the money in minutes. So NAB, the bank, took a equity stake in our business earlier in the year, and part of that was plugging us as the first non-bank organization in the nation into the MPP, so the new payments platform, or OSCO or PayID, if any of you have seen that, into their payment rails. And that means that when an individual draws down on the app, we send that money and it should be in their account instantly. And as I mentioned, we've had some pretty incredible, so there was a domestic violence case the other day, which we were able to support. So a lady who was able to actually get out of a potentially threatening situation. And if you think about that, it's a matter in that case of minutes or potentially hours, but minutes more likely, where your ability to access something to help you get out of it makes a big difference. So we're very fortunate of that partnership. When we talk about payroll, there's two key things that we need to be very, very conscious of. So payroll is a relatively admin heavy role. And by asking a payroll or HR professional to add additional processes to their current reconciliation workflow or whatever it might be at the end of the payroll period, that's a difficult conversation. So we are very conscious that we need to make it simple, and we have done so. So we now work with everybody from Frontier to Ascender to Attaché HR3, MYOB, SAP, you name it, pretty much every payroll platform in Australia. And on the TNA side, we also work with everyone from Kronos to Time Target and Time Tech, RightTech, Tumblr, really any system you need us to work with. And we do so in a way that makes it simple so that there's no admin work. We also need to be, I mean, at the end of the day, we're dealing with payroll data. So on the security side, it's arguably the organization's most valuable pieces of data. So we also need to be extremely conscious of how we deal with and set up the processes to restrict our access to or visibility into data that we're not consented to see. So if anybody's interested in understanding more on those 2 points, I'll leave my email and phone number at the end, and seriously, please feel free to reach out and ask us. So one of the other things that's key for us, this is more on the onboarding piece, is helping an organization effectively communicate the benefits. So we know how powerful it can be, but because it's a new product to market, it sometimes isn't the easiest thing to explain. And part of our job is to make it easy to explain it to the stakeholders in the organization to get buy-in, but B, to also make it easy for the employees to understand. And our job in this is to make HR look like heroes. So, and that's our customer success team's motto. If we can make HR look like a hero in rolling this out, we've done an awesome job. So we'll come to you with best practices about how we've seen Eamd rolled out in other organizations, and then work with you to customize it for your organization. We also do a lot of work into understanding what did we say we want to be accountable for? So how can we measure success? So if we said we want employee net promoter score to go up, then that's what we're going to help measure with you to make sure we're accountable. If we wanted to have an impact on retention and wanted to make sure that there was no admin work, then that's what we do. And if we wanted to just see usage of the platform, then that's also what we do. So our job in the integration and onboarding piece is to initially make it simple, secure, and easy for you to integrate, and then also make it simple for you to effectively execute the rollout of, and then make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to what we've said we would do. And that's pretty much it for today. So one thing I'd be keen to leave you with is when we go into organizations, we're conscious there's a lot on HR and payroll professionals' plates. But if we think about what we're trying to do to support our employees, and I don't know if any of you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, learning that in university or school, but before we get to the point as an organization of trying to impact the self-actualization at the top of that, creating an employer brand and value proposition, we think there's a really important conversation to be had around making sure that someone's physiological needs or their ability just to survive day to day is there. If you have any questions at all, my email is at the bottom. It's josh@earn.com, and so is my mobile number, and we'd absolutely love to hear from you. And anyway, thank you so much for having me on today. I hope you enjoyed it, and please feel free to shoot questions. Thanks, guys.